Welcome back to Deepin State. I'm Nick Hawks. This podcast is sponsored by 𝐒𝐮𝐦𝐦𝐚𝐫𝐲. We're super excited to have you on today to talk to Reagan and Mike from Lattice. This episode is sponsored by 𝐒𝐮𝐻awks and Associates, the most experienced DePIN consultancy in the space. We help projects develop strategy, messaging, and token incentives. We'll have a little bit more on us later in the show. Before we get super started, hit the like, subscribe, the bell, all the usual things that helps us keep bringing great guests like Reagan and Mike on the show. Reagan, Mike, thanks guys for coming on.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, I'm super psyched. So normally we do the shows with founders. You guys are on the other side of the fence. Tell me a little bit about what Lattice does and maybe a little bit about the thesis. I know you guys have been here since the beginning, and Mike, certainly you had the first name for the space that you very gracefully allowed to be shelved. So walk me through, maybe Reagan, starting with you, and then we'll go to Mike. What does Lattice do? What are you guys doing here?
Yeah, TIPIN reminds me, what's like the better version of VHS that never took off? I think it's Betamax.
Yeah.
Mike tried to make TIPIN happen, but it didn't. Sadly, it didn't go anywhere. Mike and I have been working together for the last 6 years. The first 4 of those were at CoinList. So I was the first employee there. Mike joined maybe 6 months after I did. And we helped launch a lot of the large layer 1 blockchains and grow CoinList into kind of one of the larger like financial services players in the space. We left to start a venture fund called Lattice. So I'd say we are founders, have a little bit easier job running a venture fund than running a company, but, still technicality. And our thesis was really founders wanted to work with founders, like people who had had real operating experience in the space. I don't need to tell you, like building a company in crypto is really hard. And we've been doing that for a long time. We felt like that experience was valuable to founders. Mike has led most of our, kind of drive on the DePIN side. So I'll kick it over to him to talk about kind of how we started getting involved in the space.
Yeah, Nick, so when we raised Lattice 1 in 2021, I think that was really the peak of Helium mania. Really before its kind of fall from grace in the fall time. But, our view at the time was that there would be more projects like Helium. And I think at the time, people were calling it DY for decentralized wireless. And one of the first companies that we saw that was taking the Helium model and applying it elsewhere was 𝐒𝐮𝐬. And obviously they're not in the wireless communication space and more in mobility. But our view was there was going to be a lot of entrepreneurs and founders in various sectors that would do this. So, we took the view that there should be a name for the space that was all encompassing of not just decentralized wireless, but could pull in other sectors as well. And like Regan said, throughout TIPIN for token incentivized physical infrastructure networks, Sammy modified that to decentralized physical infrastructure networks. So I always take half credit for naming the category, but that's when it really came to light, and it's blown up since then to not only be all encompassing of, I think, physical infrastructure networks that we think about like Helium or 𝐒𝐮𝐬. But also kind of the other side, which are these digital resource networks like file storage, compute, and CDNs, which really are just kind of all encompassing of another area. But the sector has really grown and caught a lot of hype despite the name TIPIN not being adopted. But still a fun part of the journey.
Part of the history. Yeah. I mean, you ran the first TIPIN summit that was in New York. So I think you got a pretty good hold on that claim. I'm sorry we didn't call this TIPIN State, but you got to go with what Massari is rolling with. So
I'm appreciative. The goal was accomplished, which was to have a sector that included more than just decentralized wireless. And I think we've arrived there.
Yeah. Okay. So you guys are coming from this idea of being founders, which is super cool. When you guys are looking at projects and you're assessing them, you're looking at the founders, is it more about the founders that you're looking at or the potential upside of the projects? I've always known, at least Mike, when we've talked, you've been uber practical or ultra practical. Maybe we get uber out of this one. Super practical. Like, how do you guys look at founders in that sense?
Yeah, I mean, I think in the DePIN space in particular, it really does require a founder with subject matter expertise that is specific to the sector that they're going after. So whether that's wireless telecommunications, energy, mobility, some sensor category, compute, file storage. we do see a lot of pitches from teams where maybe they just have some crypto experience and they're like, oh, wouldn't it be cool if we took DePIN and did it here? And I think it makes sense. It's like, it's a hot category. People are excited about it. Why not try to build there? But if you think about the sustainability of any particular project in the space, like having a good understanding of how that industry works, who the network players are, like how you sell to them, because usually the demand comes from outside of crypto, requires that a founder have that subject matter expertise coming into this versus just knowing the crypto side. So our view really is that like the crypto side can either be learned, hired, or like a co-founder could be brought in that really understands, the token or community building, et cetera. But it's pretty rare that you have a founder that also has the experience within the industry that they can bring to the table.
And that was partially why we got so excited about Demo early on. It was like a very unusual combination of like mobility and crypto experience in the founding team.
Dig it. And then I know with Max and I, we play very different roles at GoldHawks. Like when you guys think about yourselves, what do you position yourselves, or how do you think of each of your kind of roles at Lattice? Does one of you do one thing and the other, or do you kind of do the same thing?
Is the masterful tweet threadador. So I'm trying to take notes from the master, but Reagan definitely plays that card really well. At Lattice, I think part of it is us following either our natural proclivities or where our interests lie. So like DePIN was something that very early on, like I took a keen interest in, really wanted to go after it. So like, putting that event together, starting to pull together industry players, which is something that I definitely really enjoy. But at the same time, like there's areas that Reagan also excels at, or he has particular interest areas in. And so I think naturally you kind of just gravitate towards, what you're going to be most excited about, because that's likely to be, where you're going to be able to do your best work.
Yeah, Reagan, do you think about this in a different way? You're like, oh, I just do the Twitter and then Mike does everything else, or
if all I did was the Twitter, my job would be easier and I'd
Right.
probably be way less sane than I am right now. Yeah, I think there's kind of like the horizontal and the vertical split. On the horizontal side, like Mike has led a lot more of what we've done in DePIN. I've done a lot of work with companies in our portfolio that are kind of more on the consumer, the Web3 growth side. So Layer 3, Galaxy, we have a bunch of portfolio companies that have kind of like fit in that, the crypto native consumer vertical. I think I tend to do more, I'd say, of like the operational work. I talk to our LPs a bit more. I think Mike's a little bit more likable. So, he spends a lot of time with our portfolio founders, just kind of charming them and keeping them happy. And then when someone like really messes up, or we really need to give someone like a kick in the ass, then they get both of us.
Nice. That's a good way to do it. I think Max and I see the same kind of thing. He's like, oh, if I want a bulldog, I'm like, hey Max, go after these people.
Yeah, I don't know which one of us is the bulldog, but
one of you. Yeah. Okay. Let's see. Let's take a quick break and talk about today's sponsor, GoldHawks and Associates. We're a Deepin consultant firm helping projects with strategy, messaging, and token incentives. We run a blog for founders over at goldandhawks.com. Produce this show, and most importantly, work with the core teams and communities of your favorite projects in the space to ensure tokenomics and incentives are fully aligned to build out some of the most badass physical infrastructure networks in the world. If your project needs help in any of these, check out goldandhawks.com. And of course, check out the Lattice folks. Let's talk about some projects that you guys are psyched on right now. Anything new coming down the pipe? You're like, ooh, we're pretty pumped on this one.
Yeah, I think in the DePIN space specifically, we've invested in a number of projects here. One of the most recent investments we did that I think we introduced you guys to is a project called Blockcast, and I think the tagline of the TLDR for them is scaling the internet. If you're familiar with most of the data bandwidth usages for the internet today, about 60 to 70% of it comes from just streaming video. So whether that's Netflix, Amazon, whatever like people like to stream online. Clearly people like to stream a lot of content, but it takes a lot of data. And the reason for this is that the way the internet protocol was set up for streaming data is it was a one-to-one connection. So server to client. And Blockcast has a solution that allows for over-the-air one-to-many, which significantly reduces the cost and the just general like data consumption requirements. And the founder, who comes from the telecommunications space, was part of the team that built Magma, which is the open source language that Helium is built on top of. They were acquired by Facebook previously. Has been working on this problem set for a long period of time, and token incentive model was perfect for getting the physical infrastructure out into the world that would allow this to actually work. Without it, would just like not really be possible. So while they're still really early in the journey, it's a recent investment we're quite excited about, and think they'll be able to come to market in the next 6 months or so.
Yeah, I mean it's an enormous cost savings, and it's such a big market. It's exciting to see. I think in this sense, like I got to be careful not to insult any companies out there, but to see more real companies coming in saying like, hey, there's some very clear demand stuff here. And while DePINs are like the ultimate manufacturing YOLO, where you build the supply first and you see what happens, it's really cool to see the demand stuff coming in as well. Regan, what are you seeing?
Yeah, I think like one of the companies we've been most excited about is called Karate Combat. It's not in the DePIN category, but
okay,
basically just crypto native consumer experiences and things that like new things people can do with crypto. That's like, I think, our overarching thesis about what gets us excited. DePIN is a subset.
Oh,
And
really? Okay.
I think kind of like introducing people into crypto in new ways, we think that can really expand the market. And so Karate Combat is essentially a full strike karate league. You can think of it like UFC without the wrestling. And the guys who bought it basically introduced a token to govern the league. There's like a native gambling component built in. They call up only gaming. And generally, like the vision is to cede control of the league to the fans long term. So they've started to do really well. Really just kind of like natively embedded the token and speculating on who you think is going to win fights into the league. And it's just different. Like it's a new thing. There's no points. It's not like, like the 10th airdrop farming app. And so I think on like a few year time horizon, which is what we generally think about, I hope there's 10 things like Karate Combat where, again, similar to like Helium Mobile, it's just like, oh yeah, you can start doing stuff in crypto kind of by doing something that like fits into what you already do.
Interesting. Okay. So I hadn't figured out that you guys were beyond DePIN until, funnily enough, we got onto this piece, so that DePIN is just a subset of what you're doing. And because you're coming from this really deep crypto background, you're saying like, hey, what we're really seeing is crypto and the world coming together. And DePIN is maybe the most obvious piece of that, but taking crypto out of just crypto degens and into the rest of the world. Am I getting that right?
I mean, sports gambling outside of crypto degens, it's not that far outside. But yeah, I think like DePIN is definitely a subset of what we do. It's a category we're excited about, and we've been fortunate to work with awesome teams. I think our general view is like the biggest opportunities in the space are things that expand the market. And so on the infrastructure side, that could be something like Privy that just makes it easier for people to engage in any Web3 app.
Yep.
But on the kind of application or consumer side, it's like what can get a new audience excited about crypto, using crypto products, earning crypto. And so DePIN's been a large part of that, but it's not the only thing.
Got it. Mike, is there anything that you're seeing coming down the pipe, maybe structurally in DePIN, or like the way that you think about it, that is changing as you're seeing this market heat up?
Yeah, I think Nick, when we first met, the DePIN category, well, it was still yet to be named. I think both of us thought of it really as these more tangible physical resources. So whether that was an antenna that you were putting up on the roof of your home, or some other device plugging into your car, et cetera. And with the expansion to these more digital resource network type protocols, what I'd say right now is a lot more of the developer interest has probably been gravitating towards building for that use case. Probably one, just because, it's classically like bits versus atoms. It's definitely a lot easier to work with bits versus atoms. So entrepreneurs and founders, I think, are just like software expertise, like they're going to move in that direction. I think also just like the growth of AI, clearly like that's catching a big hype cycle. So I think from a development perspective, like there's still a lot of like entrepreneur interest that's going there. One area of DePIN that hasn't quite taken off yet, that there's been a lot of interest in from both investors and just I think people thinking that there's some opportunities is in the energy space. So some sort of energy related DePIN, and we've invested in two. There's one called React Network or Daylight, and another one called 𝐒𝐮𝐦𝐦𝐚𝐫𝐲, which has a token live. 𝐒𝐮𝐦𝐦𝐽 is sort of a combination of both DePIN and climate. So climate assets, in this case, like these 𝐒𝐮𝐦 credits that are produced. But their model is simple. It's like you can clearly incentivize human beings in the world to do things in the world. Like you can clearly incentivize them to do things. So like they'll put up mining facilities in their backyard. They'll go crazy to earn tokens. Why don't we do that and get them to produce something that's a useful asset for the world? So in this case, it can install solar to generate solar credits, which then can be sold on the open market. So I think energy is an area that hasn't quite like broken out in the like public, like no one's really talking about it yet, but it's probably like yet to, I just think it's another area that will get quite interesting, but at least from a, pitch decks that we see, I think more on the digital resource DePINs versus the physical resource DePINs.
Got it. Yeah, no, I'm seeing a bunch of the same things. Obviously, it's a lot faster to spin up these DRNs and the PRNs. So, fellas, thanks a ton for coming on. I think we could talk for an hour or two about the VPP stuff and all the crazy things that are going down in power. But where's the best place for folks to find you, especially founders who watch this and are like, yeah, I want to work with these guys? Where should they, Regan, where should they track you guys down?
I think just on Twitter. So my handle is my first name, last name, 𝐅𝐸𝐺𝐴NBOZMAN. You can also find Mike there. He doesn't have as many followers as me, but he'll probably maybe more likely to respond to your DMs.
Cool. We'll put links down in the description to make sure people can find you. But right on, guys. Thanks so much for coming on.
Yeah, you can find me first name, last name, Mike 𝐒𝐮𝐦𝐽𝐫𝐲, 𝐒𝐮𝐦𝐽𝐫𝐲, and then you can also find us at Lattice_fund.
Got it. Ripping. Thanks, guys.
Thanks.
We'll catch you next time.
Thanks for having us.